Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the 6 weight loss mistakes that kept me fat by Juliana Crispo, I believe is her name. So Steph and I are going to be reacting to this. I'm Leslie Hooper.
I'm Steph Miramontes.
Let's get started. Steph, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Hey, Juliana, I thought you were trying to lose weight. Yeah, girl, I'm intuitive eating. It's great. Today, we're talking 6 weight loss mistakes. I'm someone that has made every single one of these mistakes. I've probably made more than these mistakes, but for the interest of time, we're going to talk about these 6. These are mistakes that I made for years on my fitness journey. More recently, as someone who was pregnant during the pandemic and gained a bunch of weight, and in a former life, somebody that used to drink their weight in apple martinis and polish it off with Whataburger. Yeah, Whataburger. It was close to my apartment. Then in 2015, I got pretty shredded for my wedding. I went on to earn my pro card in 2 natural bodybuilding federations as a bikini competitor and win my pro debut in 2016. And I've maintained a relatively lean physique since. So mistake number 1, I thought for the longest time that exercise was the key to fat loss. What I would do is I would go to the gym, I'd get on a cardio machine, I'd screw around with some weights, and then I'd go home and I would just eat like I normally did. But I would also overcompensate because I was hungry from all that cardio. Cardio just makes me like ravenous. This is why now my main source of cardio is just walking 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day because it doesn't make me very hungry. Also, when I'm just getting into a new weight loss phase, I prioritize getting my calorie deficit down first. I'll take 1 up to 2 weeks just to master my calorie deficit before I even touch exercise.
The reality is you don't even need exercise to lose fat. Just eat in a calorie deficit. Cardio activity is just a tool to make it go faster, and strength training is what gives your body shape so you don't get skinny fat.
What do you think?
I think she's funny. I like her little clips. I mean, she's not wrong, right? As far as exercise, a lot of cardio can make you hungrier. So that's definitely a possibility. And nailing your diet is the key to losing weight. Not necessarily losing fat though. If you strength train, it's funny because she's like, before I even touch exercise, but I'm like, no, you're strength training. And strength training is exercise. I think she meant before I even touch cardio, she gets her diet on lock basically. But yeah, I mean, you get into a calorie deficit, you stop eating at your maintenance or surplus level, then you are going to lose weight. If you are strength training, then you are going to primarily lose body fat instead of just weight. And that creates the toned physique that she is talking about. I did kind of think it was funny that we threw in the postpartum videos. I felt like, okay, like we're just going to be like, here's my 1 month postpartum and my 9-month postpartum, as if that matters. I don't know, like the postpartum period is so unique and different for so many people that it just feels a little shamey to me. But I mean, overall, I think she's not wrong.
Well, it certainly appeals to a specific demographic, and I would say the larger demographic, because so many people feel pressure to get back into their pre-baby body weight or physique in a very short amount of time. And frankly, it's good for her business and messaging in order for her to be able to accomplish that. Certainly appealing to a lot of people. All right, well, I'm with you. I don't see a whole lot of red flags in this first one. It didn't really grab my attention as anything that was too off base. I agree with a lot of what she's saying here. So let's continue and see what the other remaining mistakes are.
Mistake number 2, I believed intuitive eating would work for me. Intuitive eating is a way of eating popularized by this book, and it took off in the height of diet culture because so many people have had horrible experiences with dieting. You might fall in that camp. I've fallen in that camp. A lot of people fall in that camp. As she talks about it in her book, there's 10 principles, 10, to intuitive eating, but the general gist is to be mindful and eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. Many fitness influencers to this day talk about intuitive eating as a good approach to weight loss. For example, one of the first fitness influencers I ever followed was Buff Bunny, and she posted this video called "This Diet Worked for Me." And in this video, she talks about how she used intuitive eating to lose the weight.
Because you don't have to track anything. You do want to pay attention though. So that's the thing, is like every intuitive eater is different. The way that I do it, I'm an intuitive eater. I eat when I'm hungry. I stop when I'm full. And I do pay attention to macros, but I don't track everything. I don't count everything. I shoot for like at least 100 grams of protein, and then the rest goes to carbs and fat, and I intuitive eat with that. So
What? Huh. You know, I've never tracked macros or weighed my food before, but this whole Buff Bunny diet just feels right to me. You know what I'm saying? Her videos just make me feel fuzzy inside. On the flip side, there's also nutrition influencers like Abby Shart who very clearly say intuitive eating is not for fat loss. Let's watch what she says.
Intuitive eating helped me lose weight. Intuitive eating is not a weight loss diet. Let's get that clear. It's very clear that most influencers using this terminology just don't really understand it at all.
Boom! She said it. I get that we can all aspire to be intuitive eaters, but for the majority of us that have some weight to lose, intuitive eating is not something you should even be considering for weight loss purposes. It was great. At the height of my 2 a.m. Whataburger addiction, I was working like 80 to 90 hours a week across 4 jobs and just struggling to pay rent for my apartment next to Whataburger. And then I'd get really down on myself because in a moment of like a hangry, stressed out freak out, I would cave and I would eat the jar of peanut butter sitting in my apartment. And that's what I would do. Yes, I aspired to be more mindful. And yes, I aspired to intuitively eat one day. But at the time, that just wasn't a realistic possibility for me to lose the weight that I had gained.
Okay, here we go. Go ahead, Steph.
Well, first of all, howdy neighbor. Clearly she's a Texan if she's got Whataburger. I know Whataburger recently expanded, but she seems like she's had it around for a while. So she's a Texan like me. So I think it's funny because spot on. Intuitive eating is not a weight loss protocol. Can people lose weight doing it? Sure. Some do, some don't, some gain weight. But when we think about, but that's different than being mindful and listening to your body, right? The 10 principles are all real solid. We've talked about that before and how we generally support and agree. But when she talks about coming home and after her 4 jobs and going to town on the pint of peanut butter or whatever, that has nothing to do with whether or not intuitive eating worked for her. That has everything to do with her trying to fix her exhaustion, for her to emotionally unwind and self-soothe and things like that, which is emotional overeating. It has nothing to do with your intuition. So to me, that doesn't even belong in the same category. That's a different mistake. The mistake she made that kept her overeating or overweight or whatever the video is called was emotional overeating because she was burnt out from 4 jobs. That's its own category, IMO.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like those are 2 separate issues. Were you physically hungry? Probably not. To me, she comes across as somebody who doesn't have a very clear understanding between the difference of mind hunger versus or physical hunger, stomach hunger in that same way. And frankly, most people don't have that language. I mean, this is exactly what we teach in the Unstuffed program. And our clients work on mastering their fullness for weeks and weeks. And so if you are hopping on the bandwagon of intuitive eating with the intention of weight loss, you're screwed because it is not a plan. There's no step-by-step process that ensures that you are in any kind of calorie deficit. There's language about hunger and fullness, but there's not even a clear scale in determining what degree of hunger, what degree of fullness, and all of these tools and strategies that we use in Unstuffed to help our clients clearly identify how hungry, how full, what does it feel like, emotional hunger versus physical hunger, 2 different things. And most people don't have a lot of clarity on it at first because it's like learning a new language. And they're so in their head eating according to their rules or their calorie counts or their meal plan that there's no real conversation happening with hunger and fullness, especially if your primary motivation is to lose weight. There's just so much second guessing and uncertainty around it in the beginning that, of course, you're just going to revert back to dieting when you get a little too outside of your comfort zone. And it is really uncomfortable, which is why I think people do best in a framework with a mentor, a coach to kind of hold their hand and offer them reassurance that, yes, we have seen 2,500 people go through this process successfully. this is what it looks like, and what you're doing, we might want to take a look at a bit more closely. So any other thoughts?
Nope, moving on.
Let's go on to mistake number 3.
Mistake number 3. I was afraid of tracking calories and weighing my food. One time I went out to a bar in my hot mess express phase, and I saw this like really hot bartender, and her arms just looked amazing. What would you like to drink? Oh, I'll have an apple martini, please. And how do I get arms like you? Oh, I just eat lots of chicken and broccoli. So I went home and I started eating lots of chicken and broccoli. And I actually gained weight. I got chubbier from eating chicken and broccoli.
Because I felt so deprived of the foods I really loved while trying to eat clean with this chicken and broccoli diet, I would binge on foods I actually craved late at night. However, had I invested time up front and just learning from tracking and weighing my food, I could have learned that there's no such thing as unhealthy or bad foods, just unhealthy portion sizes. And so I could still enjoy all the things I love in moderation on my weight loss journey without creating these fear foods of anything that fell outside of my chicken and broccoli meal plan.
You don't have to track and weigh your food forever. Even a lot of fitness influencers say that they'll go from periods of intuitive eating where they just like listen to their body a little bit. And then when they start to get a little bit more fluffy, they'll bring it in, they'll start tracking and weighing their food again. It's not about being married to your food scale or MyFitnessPal. It's about learning and then unlearning along your journey.
Okay, Steph. I feel like this was more about whole foods, good and bad food labeling than really what she identified as calories and macros, but that's just me.
It just reminds me of the good old days of when IIFYM was young, right? And learning how to fit your favorite foods into your macros. And so when we do calorie count and macro count, what I've seen a lot of, and I'm not saying everybody's like this, but what I've seen a lot of is it creates food fear. It doesn't alleviate food fear. It creates food fear because now we're looking at these packages and it's like, cool, I can have 150 calories of oatmeal and that's a full bowl of oatmeal, or I can have 150 calories of Oreos and that's 3 Oreos. But if I just have 1 Oreo and I crush it up into my oatmeal, then I can pretend I'm having Oreos when I'm really having oatmeal and it's just a few bites less of my oatmeal, and then I can have it all and everything is fine. And now we're terrified of Oreos because like, we know that 3 of them or whatever has 150 calories. I actually don't know how many calories are in Oreos. They're gross. But but I do know how many calories are in oatmeal because I used to weigh and measure my food obsessively for years. So I do understand kind of the logic here of like, hey, all foods can fit in moderation and you can make them work in your numbers. But what I found I was doing was skipping eating for the majority of the day so that I could start eating at like 11, 12, something like that, so that I could fit all my food into a teeny tiny window. And I still had to eat the foods that I wanted to eat, which was never Ben & Jerry's. It was always like Halo Top bullshit. Because at least that had protein in it and I could pretend that I was getting what I wanted, but I ended up just having these weird healthified versions of gross things. So, and then you just become terrified by the label as if I would have ever eaten a whole pint of Ben & Jerry's before, even when I was in my larger body, before I ever started figuring out this whole calorie macro thing. I never sat down to an entire pint of Ben & Jerry's. That didn't start happening until I brought Halo Top and started looking at my numbers and thinking, I can fit a whole pint of this into my numbers. I didn't need a pint of ice cream ever until I was a dieter. That was the bullshit.
It just makes eating so complicated.
Yep.
We've already got a system built inside of us, an innate calorie counter. This is literally what hunger and fullness signals were designed to do. But because we've become so disconnected, we now have to plug things into MyFitnessPal app and eat according to a intermittent fasting window. And we can't eat after 8 p.m. and we can't have carbs and back-to-back meals, but we also have to have the right ratio of protein, fats. It's like, no, thank you. Did all of it. It just consumed my life. And in my quest for a smaller body, I just had a smaller life. I was afraid to go to restaurants. I was afraid to eat foods without knowing what the macronutrient breakdown was going to be. I mean, like you said, a lot of fear, and it just doesn't have to be this way. I can appreciate where she's at in her journey. She seems a lot like me 10 years ago. So maybe if she continues on the path she's on, she'll be having these conversations 10 years from now. But I can really see myself in pretty much everything. I gained weight from eating whole foods. I thought that if I just ate whole foods, that I would lose weight. And surprise, I didn't. I gained weight, as a matter of fact. Who knew that you could gain weight eating chicken and broccoli? But it happened.
Number 4, I didn't understand how to allocate macros when I was in my dieting phase. Many of you know macros are just protein, carbs, and fats. They serve different purposes to nourish your body. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is being in a calorie deficit. However, the key to sustaining a calorie deficit is just don't get hungry. That's the name of the game. Don't get hungry. As soon as you get hungry, all bets are off. The little hangry monster comes out and it's just bad. Having a general idea of the macronutrient distribution you're consuming is very important to make sure that you stay feeling full. And if you stay full, you're more likely to adhere to your calorie deficit. Make sense? What happens if I'm not in the ballpark generally of hitting these macros over a period of a few days is on like day 3, I'll start to get really hungry. And then all of a sudden I find myself like wandering into a 7-Eleven and just buying donuts and eating them. And I don't know what happened. I just black out.
You don't want to get hungry because all bets are off when you have what is a totally natural, normal physical sensation like feeling sore, hot, cold, tired, an urge to go to the bathroom. Hunger is just your body's way of communicating a need. It is definitely not an emergency situation. But if you tell yourself it is, then you'll absolutely act like it.
3 days in and we're ending up blacked out in a pile of donuts. That's pretty scary. This is where she
I
loses.
think it's interesting though, is she is a competitor, has a competition background. To get that shredded, that lean, to get stage ready, you do have to learn how to endure quite a bit of hunger. And from my perspective, training your brain to be comfortable with it and embracing it and seeing it as an asset and a tool even would make a lot of sense in order to be in that state and finding some comfort while being there.
I think it's reasonable to say, hey, I'm in a calorie deficit. I'm going to manage my hunger as reasonably as possible, meaning like if you eat a donut for breakfast and that's, X amount of calories or whatever, or you eat scrambled eggs and oatmeal or something, I don't know, that's competitor food, then chances are you're probably going to be held over longer with the eggs and oatmeal than you would the donut. That's just science. That's just your body. It's not dramatic. But when it comes down to the perfect macros to keep you from ever getting hungry, no, that doesn't exist. I'm sorry. If you're in a calorie deficit, your body is snacking on your ass. Eventually, it's not going to be very comfortable doing that. And it's going to send up a hunger signal, whether you like it or not. And if you continue the idea that hunger is a dangerous emergency problem, then now we're starting to create fear of food. If I eat a scrambled egg, oh, that's only, 2 tablespoons of food. But if I have the same calories in egg whites, I can have a big old bowl of food and I can just never stop eating. And then my belly can never empty. But at the depths of my dieting days, my macros were quote unquote perfect. And guess what? About a half an hour after I was done with meal 1, I was thinking about if I could have meal 2. Like, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Because I was hungry. Because I was in a calorie deficit for a very long time. So the hunger is going to happen. If you're losing weight, hunger is going to happen. And in fact, it should. It's normal. It's desirable as long as it's reasonable. And then you manage it. You take care of it by feeding your body because that's what it's asking for. Yeah, this is the area she loses me completely.
With her perspective, I can certainly appreciate the idea that protein is going to burn more calories digesting, right? Thermal effect of food than a donut. So that might satiate you for a longer period of time. But I really cannot get on board with this language around hunger being problematic. We've even coined cute little phrases like being hangry. Let's not blame hunger on you acting like an asshole or a child throwing a temper tantrum. That's just poor emotional regulation. The two don't have to have anything to do with one another. But if you have this language and you've adopted this belief that hunger is problematic, then we start blaming hunger for things or reacting to hunger in a mismanaged way. And the other piece of this is the fear of hunger creates a cycle of overeating, because if we're constantly afraid of getting hungry, and we're like, oh no, I have this meeting and I'm going to be in there for 2 hours. I'm not going to have enough time to eat lunch or whatever. And now we're starting to double down, eat more than our body actually needed, because we're trying to prevent hunger. So we're just over consuming to prevent hunger from happening. But hunger should be happening. And it should be happening anytime you eat. That's the whole point. That's how babies know when it's time to eat. They cry after a hunger signal and they communicate, it is time to eat. This is nature, y'all. It's basic science and biology, but we have completely lost the plot because we are so eating from our heads instead of our bodies that we've just unplugged, totally disconnected. And you don't have to do a mathematical equation before you eat. It should really not be so complex. All right, let's move on. I think we have 2 more mistakes to dive into.
I would try to overcompensate when I had one of my 7-Eleven freakouts. This was mainly more so in my bikini competitor days, because you had to be so black and white about your diet. What would happen is when I messed up, somehow I just like ate a donut or 3, I would try and overcompensate the next day with doing more cardio or trying to eat less carbs and fats. And this was just a recipe for this horrible cycle of binging and over-exercising and feeling horrible. And that's just no way to live. Now, if that happens and I overeat on my diet for the day, I just stick to what I would normally eat on my daily diet, almost as if that 7-Eleven incident never happened. I just learn from it and I move on. So whatever you do, if you ever have a mess up in your diet, don't ever try and overcompensate by doing more cardio or eating less. Just eat as if you would normally eat so that you don't fall into any binge and restrict cycle.
Any thoughts on this one? I mean, she's really just talking about this all or nothing perfectionist mindset, which we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about. It's kryptonite to your success. It just keeps you inconsistent because we are in this constant stop, then go pattern, and we don't really get anywhere.
This is the beauty of actually not treating hunger like a pariah, is if you do overdo it for whatever reason, guess what? Your body's going to let you know when it's time to eat again. It's going to give you a hunger cue. I love the hunger habit that we teach. It's my favorite because it's just like, hey, you overdid it. Shit happens. There are a million reasons why you might overeat, environment, hormones, emotions, but you can always rely on that hunger signal to come and let you know, like, hey, ready up, time to go again. And so treating it like it's this big scary thing, even, I like her idea of just continuing on the day as planned, make your next best decision. It's something we talk about all the time. But even as you get more advanced, it's just kind of like, go to the wait till you're hungry again. And then you should eat. Like, that's just how normal people that don't have this diet drama bullshit, that's how they eat. They might overeat and be like, oh, too much. And then they don't think about food again until their body tells them to. It's the best.
Yeah, I literally just tell clients, it's like putting fuel in your tank. You put more fuel in it, you're going to go further. It's going to take longer until that gas light comes on. Okay, now it's time to eat again, which is basically the same thing as your hunger signal. So you just might be able to go further in between your meals because you overconsumed at your earlier meal. This is the beauty of having that internal calorie counter. We don't have to live in our brains. We can just say, yeah, that was uncomfortable. Don't want to make a habit out of eating that much food. Learn the lesson and move the hell on with your life and wait until you're hungry again. That's literally all that's required. No drama, no beating yourself up, no getting back on track. It's just simple. Not always easy in the beginning, but very simple. Okay, final mistake. So let's see what she has to say here.
Mistake number 6, I was afraid of building muscle. Have you ever noticed that pretty much like all the female fitness influencers, or a lot of them, are really, really short? My theory is that the short ones are building muscle because they just want to be able to eat more. And I know that's the case for me. Like, the more mass and the more muscle that I have, the more I weigh, the more I can eat and not gain too much fat. Amazing. Yay. I love you. But for the longest time, I thought that picking up the weights would just automatically like turn me into the Hulk or something. It took me years of focused effort in the gym and being methodical about my nutrition to put on the muscle mass I was able to achieve here.
Okay. Final thoughts, Steph?
I mean, yeah, if you put on more muscle and you weigh more, then technically you get to eat more. But the bigger concern for me is, why are we obsessing about how much we get to eat? We're talking about a few bites per meal, not a massive amount more. Over time and over years, putting on a lot of muscle, it's going to change your ability to eat a little bit more, depending on a number of factors, a million factors, but it's not straight across the board. And here's the message that it gets so messy. It's like, well, now that I'm strength training, I get to eat more. And it kind of reminds me of people that are eating their calories back because they've earned it. And so again, that is where the body really takes the cake here and does the best job of saying, we need more food. We've had enough. I'm going to communicate with you. I'm going to keep it 100 rock solid, and I'm going to let you know. That way you don't have to think about this shit so much. Because if I'm just thinking, I need to build as much muscle as I can so I can eat more, that means that my relationship with food is that I have put it on a pedestal. I think it's really, really, really important. And a lot of my mental space is going to go toward that. As a bikini competitor, no surprise there. This is literally her hobby. And I want people to know that. If you're obsessing about your glute size and your shoulder size and this being in proportion with this and all of these little tweaks and perfections and things like that, your body is your hobby, and that's cool. But most of us just want to feel normal. Most of us want to be in pretty good shape, take good care of ourselves, look good naked, feel good. We just want something a little bit different. So this is kind of the reasonable end of the extreme approach, if you will.
Yeah, I don't get super disordered vibes from her at all. I feel like she is relatively healthy in her approach as far as what we see on camera. Who knows what the hell is going on behind the scenes, because for many, it's a whole mess. And it used to be for me too. So speaking from experience, but I'm with you. I feel like anytime we're trying to earn our food back, it's kind of problematic. I don't think there's anything wrong with competing. I'm just always curious about the reasons behind the motivation. And that's what I would just caution people, is like, this is obviously more extreme, but I'm with you. Most people just want to feel good in their bodies and want freedom to be able to eat what they want in a way that they aren't married to a MyFitnessPal app. And those things are possible, but they don't get a lot of airtime, unfortunately. So anyway, you should hang out with Steph and I. We talk about this stuff all the time. I think it's what makes us different and unique, is we embrace both. You don't have to hate yourself all the way to your goal or obsess over food, because the reality is food is it's cool. I enjoy it. But when it becomes this obsession, that's not normal. When we look at naturally thin people spending only 10% of their day thinking about food while dieters spend 70%, there's a pretty big disconnect there. That is it for me. Any final thoughts from you?
I will just say that, there are worse ways you could spend your mental and emotional energy than giving a shit about your body and how you feel. But when we start saying that microwaved protein powder is cake, we've lost it. We're no longer in, like, we have gaslit ourselves into oblivion. Microwave protein powder with water is not cake. It will never be cake. And so I just make sure that you're actually having a healthy, solid relationship with food. When we say all foods fit, there is room for everything. There really is room for everything without feeling like you have to sacrifice and manipulate and mutilate food to try and fit it in.
I would argue that actually when you eat the full fat version, the full sugar version, it's actually much more satisfying. And one pint of Halo Top doesn't turn into two. That's something that we work on with our clients right out the gate, because it is such a barrier for most people. They think that they have to eat all the healthy foods nonstop to get to their goal, because that's the messaging, but that's not reality. And how do we know that? Well, look at your kids. Look at these naturally thin people. They generally do eat all the things, and they don't have metabolism like a hummingbird on meth. They're not more genetically gifted. They just have a different mindset, different psychological framework for the way that they interact with food and their habits. And you can learn it too. All right, we are done for the day. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.